This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph and self-abasement. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen.
The initial outrage after Canada's introduction of Bill C-16 was predictable, as the bill prohibited discrimination against one's sex, regardless of biological evidence for that person's self-expressed gender identity. One of the most outspoken critics of the bill was Dr. Jordan Peterson, a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto. Peterson released a 3-part video response to the bill, expressing his opinions on the negative long-term effects of compelled speech and political correctness. He also refused to use these gender-neutral pronouns, as he stated that a person's ability to force another to refer to him in such a way is not a matter of gender expression, but rather a violation of freedom of speech. Although Peterson received a large amount of support for his videos, the university made it clear that it would not tolerate his behavior if he continued to speak out against the bill. According to one of the letters sent to Peterson, students and staff found his statements to be unacceptable, emotionally disturbing, and painful. Toronto informed Peterson that his assertions were criminal in nature and that he should remain silent on the issue or further action would be taken. Since then, Peterson has doubled down on his resistance to Canada's increasingly progressive legislation, in the process amassing hundreds of thousands of followers and over 30 million views on his YouTube channel. He has made frequent appearances at other universities to discuss the issue of compelled speech, as well as guest appearances with prominent figures such as Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan. Peterson has unintentionally become a valuable voice for those against political correctness, especially with regards to free speech on college campuses. The advent of Dr. Peterson has revealed much about many colleges' priority of tolerance and accommodation over rational and reasonable debate. It often seems contradictory, especially when these universities claim to be institutions that challenge viewpoints and prepare students for life after college. Econ Journal Watch found that of the top 40 universities in America, liberal professors outnumber conservative professors at a ratio of 12-1, and the disparity is even greater in Canada. I think an appropriate term for this would be selective diversity, as the only diversity these universities truly value is that which does not oppose their own. The recent incident at Wilfrid Laurier reflects this, and is shedding light upon the true nature of what occurs on some of these campuses. There have been many videos that discuss this matter to a fair extent, and there is a case to be made in defense of Laurier, but I find it much more useful to use this particular instance to explore some of the toxic rhetoric being used in these universities. Earlier this November, teaching assistant Lindsay Shepard showed a 5-minute clip to her communications class of a debate on gender pronouns between Dr. Jordan Peterson and Professor Nicholas Matt. According to Shepard, she presented the debate in a neutral fashion, and did so in order to encourage an open discussion within the class. In what seemed to be a friendly and effective activity, she thought nothing of it at the time. Shortly after, however, Shepard was approached by her supervisors and questioned on her motive for playing the clip. She was accused of being transphobic and creating a toxic climate for the students. The entire discussion was recorded on audio, and if what is said in this recording is accurately representative of beliefs held by the university and those like it, there may be an imperative need to reform the philosophy of these institutions. One of Shepard's accusers, Herbert Pimlott, is a communication studies teacher at Wilfrid Laurier. Pimlott discredited Peterson by associating him with the likes of Richard Spencer and Adolf Hitler. He also characterized the rhetoric of Peterson by associating it with the tactics the Nazi Party used in the 1920s. He implied that using free speech to defend Peterson's philosophy is comparable to the defense of Hitler using his speech to establish his following. even though Nazi Germany was a fascist state that censored all forms of media, which is, by definition, the opposite of free speech. Based on this implication, it is evident that Pimlott, and presumably his other colleagues, have a distorted Marxist view on the importance of free speech in college, that it is inherently immoral and requires suppression. At this point, the phrase, "the boy who cried Nazi," becomes extremely relevant, as stated best by Megan McArdle in her article, "Be Careful Who You Call a White Supremacist." It hampers our ability to discuss a phenomenon that the anti-racists actually want to discuss, and ultimately, if we continue to use it in this way, it will lose the very emotional resonance that made it an appealing substitute for more clinical terms. The same can be said, and is arguably even more true, for the term Nazi. If an actual neo-Nazi situation arises on campus in which a person or group is inciting violence or hate against anyone, the university's warnings will not have the same effect, because students will expect the typical overreaction that they have been conditioned to disregard, as with previous issues. In this case, the university is not only falsely portraying Peterson, but doing itself a disservice in the potential case of a true threat. Another point made by Shepard's supervisors is that this is an issue of whether trans people are people or not, and that turning it into a topic of debate is really undermining the rights of transgender individuals. On the contrary, however, it really is not a matter of personhood rights at all, but instead a question of whether trans people have the ability to force others to accommodate their special privileges. No such rights exist for those who may identify as a different age or race, and in my opinion, the same case could be made for age expression and race expression as it could for gender expression. Although seemingly absurd, it should not be unreasonable to suggest that there should be more consistency when it comes to disregarding biological reality in place of feelings or emotions. So no, it is not an issue of personhood rights, it is an issue of special rights. Shepard's supervisors go on to make the case that it is unacceptable to even expose these young students to the rhetoric of Peterson for two main reasons. The first being that the students don't have the critical toolkit to pick apart these alt-right ideas yet, so they must be guided in every facet of their education to ensure that they do not stray from the objective truth of extreme progressivism. This can be problematic because it not only insults the ability of their students, but also implies that their stance on the matter is the only intellectually viable one. By saying that the students might develop the wrong opinion, they are basically revealing that they believe there is only one correct opinion. The second reason is that Peterson cannot be presented as an academically credible figure due to the fact that his work has not been sufficiently peer-reviewed. "I don't find anything credible about his research," stated Pimlott. "Not only is this idiotic, it is blatantly hypocritical." Amid the chaos of this whole ordeal, the trans community is rallying to recover from this incident of hatred and bigotry. A petition at Laurier is currently in circulation to recognize that the discourse of freedom of speech is being used to mask the underlying reality of extreme transphobia. This could be a fair case, but instead of using the situation to engage in dialogue with the other side in order to reach a resolution, they are resorting to their tactics of suppression in hopes that it will somehow increase a sense of security for transgender people at the university. Perhaps this mass opposition to Peterson is the result of some major misconceptions about his ideas. He has stated many times that he does not oppose the rights of transgender individuals. The point he makes, however, is that the ability for one to self-define themselves is a slippery slope, and when others are forced to entertain that definition, it becomes a matter of violation. In this video, which will be linked in the description, Peterson brilliantly responds to a student's question about respect. He makes the distinction between respect that is earned and respect that is forced, and both those ideas tie in closely to the issues that were discussed earlier in this video. As stated before, Peterson has mounted a lot of respect, but he is also facing much opposition. As we just saw with Wilfrid Laurier, the core arguments against Peterson rarely disprove his ideas, rather attempt to undermine his credibility by associating him with people who have no relevance to Peterson at all. Again, what many of these people fail to realize is that Peterson is not opposed to transgender rights. A simple look into the reasoning behind his statements reveals that he opposes the notion that forced compliance results in long-term genuine cooperation, rather than the idea that compelled speech isn't viable due to the fact that trans people are inherently undeserving of courtesy. He asserts that no one should be granted assumed respect, regardless of gender expression, but many are twisting that into seeming like a transphobic and prejudiced view. There's a notable difference between restricted speech and compelled speech. Some degree of restricted speech is generally common for any functioning community. That is not the issue being contested. Compelled speech is an entirely different matter, and that is the ultimate point Dr. Peterson is trying to make. Thank you for watching, and please leave your thoughts below.